Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Welcome back to Detroit is Different podcast studios. And even though it's the winter time, we still rolling in community. We rolling in creativity, and we also rolling in ideas on building. So, in that same world, Dwan Dandridge, how you feeling today?
What up, Doe? Feeling good, man. Feeling
Yes,
good.
sir.
Been looking forward to this conversation all day.
Oh man, that's deep, because this has been in the talks for. It's been in talks for a minute, but that's just kind of how stuff goes sometimes. So, don't necessarily get hell-bent and think like, oh, it's not. Divine order is always in order. When we talking about our people, community work, creativity, building, development, it's divine order plays a key role. Yeah. So with that being said, Black Leaders Detroit, we're going to talk a lot about that and what that is and that program. I'm finally joined. Like I really joined. I put my money in.
That's
everything.
what's up.
I doubled
That's
down.
what's up. Thank you. Thank you.
And before we get to that, if people aren't familiar, let's just get to your Detroit story. Your Detroit story, your people, your family. What brought you all to the city of Detroit?
So that's a good question. I didn't see that one coming. But interestingly enough, so my last name, Dandridge, the one that I carry, is my mother's maiden name. My mother's last name changed to Thompson when her and my father were married. They had me when they were 15 and 16. Mom was 15, Dad was 16. Wow. So they weren't old enough to even get married then. So, I ended up getting my mom's name. I didn't realize that until I was much older because my dad had me enrolled in school and everything else under his last name, which was Thompson. But if you ask where my family's from and how they ended up in Detroit, my grandfather on my dad's side was adopted and went through the foster care system a lot. So I can't really tell you where the origin story and the roots and at least trace us back to which most of us can do down south somewhere. But on my mom's side, the name Dandridge, if you are not familiar with it, Martha Dandridge, right, who was Martha Washington after she married George Washington. Her last name was Dandridge, and my people come from the plantations that were owned by her father and her brothers. So Virginia is where the Dandridge side of my family came from. So I always tell people when they paint Washington to be a hero, I have a different, point of reference in the way that I view him as, a complicated figure, and definitely his in-laws.
That's deep, and that opens up so many points of conversation alone. But first, let's just go back to the Thompson Dandridge thing, because it was one time there, somebody was like, talk to Dwan Thompson. And then the way Dwan spells his name is, I know you guys are looking at the lower thirds, and I got another homie that spells it differently as well.
Right.
Because usually when we think Dwan, we think D-U-Y-J-U-A-N, you know what I'm saying? So, that's what we think when we think Dwan. So to see Dwan different, I'm like, I wonder, is this the same Dwan? Like, are we talking about? And then they were talking. I'm like, this got to be the same Dwan. And I had to actually call you, like, okay, is Dwan Thompson Dwan Dandridge as well?
Yeah.
So if you ever had that question,
it's like it was a surprise to me that my name wasn't Thompson, right? So I went to school, I was enrolled in school. I was always told that my last name was Thompson, and I went to school under that name, and it wasn't until I needed a birth certificate for something, maybe it was sports or a job or something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but that's when I saw my birth certificate that my last name was Dandridge, and I was like, man, it messed me up, because anybody in fact, you probably saw Thompson from Facebook, because when I first got introduced to Facebook, I was looking to connect with old friends from school.
And you needed
none of them would have known me by Dandridge.
Yeah,
You
they
know
would
what
have
I mean?
reached out and said like, "Hey, man,
Yes,
somebody stole
right.
your identity."
Right.
Dwan Dandridge that happens to be in Detroit that went to the same school as
Yeah.
us. We don't remember this guy,
Yeah.
you know.
So I'll give you another layer to my last name. So when my wife and I were married, we were trying to figure out like what last name we would use, and being committed to not passing on slave owner's name to my children or my family, we chose the name Uhuru, which means freedom. Right. So my wife, my children, like their last name is Uhuru. And because, part of my Detroit story involved me having a complicated past, it wasn't as easy for me to change my last name. I think that, right now it probably would be a lot easier for me to do that. But, that was something that we were really intentional about. Like I wasn't going to give my next generation the last name of some slaves owners.
And it's unique that you talk about that. And the main point is there was another recent Detroit is Different interview when we were talking about and you know Sarita Scott.
Yeah.
So when we were having this conversation and we talk about that journey, because I always start with like, what brought your family here? And she's like, my people come from Alabama, but they usually don't talk about it. Because they were escaping the atrocities that were
Right.
going on, the in-your-face violence, and
Right.
it's such a classic story. So she spoke of her grandfather coming, her great-grandfather, but this is the Coleman Young story. This is the Jimmy Boggs story. So many
Right.
escape, but also in that escaping, even like a story like my grandfather, even though not a Detroit guy, my paternal grandfather. People change their names too for safety reasons.
Yes.
So, you may have been in, a part of Arkansas or Florida or Georgia or whatever, and your name was Smith. But now, you get that right part of the train and you come on up to Detroit and it's like, nope, I'm no longer going to be Alan Smith. I'm going to change this to Al Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, one of the things that we don't talk about, like, in large settings is that, some of those things that we say we would have done if we were back there,
Yeah.
some of our grandfathers and grandmothers did that.
Very much so.
Right? So
yes.
that meant they needed to come up here in the middle of a night before anybody retaliated, right? And I think that that's, the way some of my family ended up here. We had some ancestors, it was like, look, like we're not having it. And they weren't going to follow the rules of that time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So.
They weren't going to follow those rules, right? And it meant that they had to flee and ended up in Detroit. Like not everybody came here, because of the auto industry.
Yeah, and the offshoots, like it just those connections and those pathways through doing all these Detroit is Different interviews. And I always like to start with like, what's your origin to the city? Because it frames some different things and how you see things. In my belief, I think that, Sarita's interview got right into this, so it's heavy in my mind. So like, I guess it's better ways to say this, your education, your knowledge base. I mean, as a marketing person that likes things plain, I can speak to this being conditioning and propaganda, however we want to package it. But we have like an onboarding of understandings in life, of how things happen and why things happen and where they happen and what to do about it. A lot of this definitely these are like understood ways. Like, we're close enough in age. Like, it's one of those things where I never knew you as a kid, but it was a point where, like, growing up in a city like Detroit, we loved playing football. It was a way we played football in the street.
Yep.
It was tackle on the grass.
Sideline tackle, two-hand touch in the street.
And we we didn't even talk about that,
never.
but it was just like a culture of like that. So then you go down south to your friends. You go down south with your cousins down there. It's like, what are you talking about? Why would you play football in the street? But they had so much more grass available to them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it'd be one of those things, you playing and then somebody throw a football and they hit a car. This is like real. This just shows my age.
Oh, yeah.
When cars first started getting alarms and the alarm go and then everybody break loose.
Exactly. Or that one play where, you had to play with the cars in the street. So somebody was running and they caught the ball and didn't know the car was there and they ran into the car. The car took them out.
And I mean, if you were savvy enough, this was like playing savvy. You would use that as a way to basically like, all right, so look, we go because this is also how street football plays are. You guys are getting the insight. The quarterback will put on their hand like this.
You go seven and you go out. You go 7 paces up and out. That's it.
So all right, when you go 7 up and out because that car is right there and he backpedaling, you gonna get him. That's it. So like just these weird things that are like, how do you what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And technically, it ain't even tackle on grass because at certain points it breaks. It would be concrete there.
You got the driveways. Yep, that's it.
But this is what boys did.
That's it.
Growing up in the Midwest, it was just a part of the culture. We understood it, and the same thing can be applied to escaping some of those traumas too, like knowing where to go, how to go, what resources to get. Similar to, we definitely recognize, and sometimes people like give a big divide from some of the brothers and sisters coming from what, as far as I feel, that labeling this line of Mexico or whatever. Like a lot of them were in land that we label as America anyway, but it's a different culture assimilating when you're, as they say, undocumented American.
Right.
It was a lot of undocumented Americans that were black from that great migration.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I'm undocumented because if I give you my real paperwork, I'm going to be going back down to a chain gang.
Yeah.
So I'm a different type of undocumented.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how many people explore that, but it's just... the stories we hear, it's real.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you talk about Sarita. So shout out to Sarita and all that she means to like so many of us in Detroit. Just need to say that. But as you talk about like it not really, people in the family not talking about it a whole lot, that was the same thing in my family. But where I did start to hear a lot of stories was when I worked at Ford. So I worked at Ford from 1999 to like 2006. And the brothers and sisters that were from the South there, they would talk about it in such detail that it would put you in the space, right? Like you would be in the land that they were on when they would tell some of the stories. And it was crazy stories. So like I won't dive into any of those stories, but I know them word for word because they had that type of impact on me once you hear them. But one of the stories that I always appreciate, there was a brother named Shiggs that I used to work with, and Shig was old school UAW dude, didn't take any mess from anybody, and if the supervisor came and was trying to abuse anybody, Shig would deal with it in a real creative way. With the equipment that he understood at a much higher level than anybody else did. But Shig would tell a story about, staying on his grandfather's land. And Shig's family owned hundreds of acres of land. And he was from Mississippi. And he said that, part of their deal was the grandfather, like, had it written up in a way that you could move on the land, you could build on the land, you couldn't sell the land.
That's deep. And that you bring that up, I mean, what's deeper about that is just your history is, it's a lot in this exploration is being discovered in these connections for a lot of us. California has, I don't want to say awarded, has given back the just due of a lot of the black families that were displaced off of shoreside property. And this is happening across the country. I had one of my best interviews as far as like what I found most fascinating this year was with the Tusk Liquor Spirits, and it was through the Black Spirits Detroit event. Usually I'm only interviewing Detroiters. I was there because it was in Detroit. Shout out Lazar and everything that he's doing. But that Tusk Liquor brand was... it was connected to a family that ended up, finding out that, okay, these are a lot of lands owed to us, and began growing, a lot of hemp, and then transitioning this hemp into rum and vodka and different things. But just that learning curve. But a lot of these same trusts in that same family about what you can do with the land, how things will happen. I mean, really connecting what's happened to the Black experience throughout history is deep. But during Reconstruction, I don't know how many of us are aware that so fast, so many of the upward mobility strides were made by Black people, because we were the people that knew how to operate in this agricultural society of America, because at the time that's what America was best. So you exponentially, almost in that span of 30 years, as those Union soldiers were protecting us from the Ku Klux Klan and these rebellious Confederates, and actually just kind of staying out of our way and allowing Black men and women to conduct business and grow. It was a lot accomplished in that time. And then these Jim Crow laws, this is where things play such a key role in this. Changed a lot of that, those grandfathers clauses and redlining, and a lot, because Reconstruction changed a lot of America on behalf of Black folks fast. And it was powerful because we were the people that had these skill sets. I mean, it was a reason why, though genius, brilliant, but the way that we hold up a George Washington Carver, he was taught a lot of what he knows from other brothers and sisters. And a lot of those brothers and sisters that were giving him game were brothers and sisters on plantations that didn't have quote unquote formal educations, couldn't write or read, but just knew the understanding of, I'm looking at the sky, I can see that fall about to come, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to take those crops, use the soil from there, bounce it over to here, and then we can take whatever's excess from that soil, make sure you jar that up. When you jar that up, that's going to be medicine. And then, we got a couple of these bugs in there. Oh, if we got those bugs, that means that we can use this. This will be some good seasoning. And it was just walking encyclopedias of information of how to utilize every piece of what it went into farming, what went into, I guess, poultry sciences and things like that, just dynamic stuff.
Yeah, and we still have that today, right? Like I think one of the versions of what that looks like now, and I'm talking about informal education, but are experts on something that we all need and we could all benefit from, right? So we have lots of conversation about workforce development, right? And, companies coming or not coming to Detroit because there's supposedly not a skilled workforce here, right? Well, when I grew up, in the 80s, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, any and everybody that lived in the neighborhood that we grew up in could find work if you wanted to, right? And it's interesting that it eventually they called it work, right, after a while. But, right, the drug dealers in the communities that we grew up in, when the community started to really change after the crack epidemic, right, they never used that as an excuse. They never used the excuse that, people aren't skilled. They were committed. They would recruit and they would train, right? Yeah. And there was science, math, and customer service, right? There was a lot that went into that occupation, if you will, right? And I think that if we really wanted to understand and know how to create a real skilled workforce in Detroit, we probably should free some of those brothers that are locked up that did it really, really well in the 80s for them to show us how to, right? Because that they weren't intimidated and they wasn't going to take that excuse as a reason to give up on what it was that they were doing at that time, right? I think that many of them are prepared and ready, just in the way that you referenced the folks that probably were mentors and trainers to George Washington Carver. I think that we could use them their experience, their know-how in a way that we all could probably benefit from. We're just not ready to call like non-traditional education something that we all need, and some of that wisdom and knowledge that we should be submitting to as an authority figure on certain subject matters.
Very much so. So as we talk about that, your parents were extremely young, so I can only imagine that paints your childhood very different than like what a lot of people. I mean, even what you saw when you turned on the television, and it's like, okay, I'm not Michael J. Fox. What was that? I forget what show that was.
Family Matters.
Yeah, this ain't Family Matters.
Right.
Whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
no,
what
that
neighborhood?
wasn't Family Matters. That was a black show. I can't remember what Michael J. Fox was, but I know what you're saying. So I grew up. I was born in the Schoolcraft area between Southfield and Greenfield, right? So stayed there until I was 4, right? Until my mom and dad were turned 18. I mean, back then you turned 18. They both dropped out of school really, really early. I think my dad said he did a day in 9th grade.
Ed
right?
Cody.
No, that would have been Cooley, if anything.
Went to Cooley.
Right? So that's where most of my aunts and uncles graduated from. So they both had really big families. So my mom, who's 8 of them, and my dad's side is 13 of them.
Wow.
Right? So I have, probably 100 first
Uncles
cousins.
I was going to say uncles and aunties.
It's like,
man,
so really big family on both sides. But, so that's where I grew up at until I was 4, right? So my parents turned 18. My dad got a job at Ford, and my mom got a job at Chrysler. Right? So they were making some money when they were 18 years old. So they were able to buy a house in Rosedale Park.
And let me say this too for the people watching and getting an understanding of sometimes if you meet a person from Detroit outside of the system, like even as industry is as the industrial age has definitely passed its peak in Detroit, especially for black folks. You still had in the 80s opportunity where without a high school diploma, you can walk into a career that provides at least the money and a standard of life where
you could be middle class.
You could be middle class because Rosedale Park, if anybody knows, that's one of the premier communities. Yeah. Throughout Detroit. So
definitely. So we live, and it's funny, we moved on the very last block in Rosedale Park, so almost on the outskirts, right?
On what side?
So we were on Plainview between Finkel and Outer Drive.
Okay.
Yep. So I remember my mom saying that, her real estate agent told her that her and my dad, look, they don't want to sell y'all this house. But like y'all have the money. Right, but they don't want to sell you. But at that time, as white flight was happening, it's not really like other white families were looking to move there. Right, they were looking to move out. So that was a story that I never forgot. My mom sharing with me. But so we lived there, and that when the 80s hit, we had some really dark struggles. My dad, who speaks publicly about it often, so I'm comfortable with sharing. He ended up having a terrible drug addiction for 10 years, and crack was like, I don't even know if you would call it a drug of choice, right? As they say, once you try, you ain't choosing it no more. That's it, right? So dealt with that, and then the layoffs hit, right, in the 80s as well. And we went from middle class to really, really struggling in some of the worst ways. So we moved from Rosedale Park when I was like 11 or 12, and we stayed on 7 Mile for a little bit. I went to Coffee, and then we ended up moving to Brightmoor after a couple years of living off 7 Mile.
And that's one of the things, like a lot of this entertainment and hip-hop explores, obviously, so much in the drug trade, but the way that it paints the picture, I think, is not. It lacks some of the story of it. Like, I don't mind not mine. I mean, I appreciate and I like some of those stories, but it's a lot of other stories in this game. And that's what I kind of liked, at least in the beginning seasons of the television show Snowfall. So we have it's like a retrospective look at crack cocaine now, just because, you know, I was born in 82. So the slogan of, you know, crack is whack. Don't do crack. Almost like idolizing the drug dealer and not necessarily showing the relationship between drug dealer, drug user is so, it almost like it's a blurry relationship in the first place, because for what I've seen living in my neighborhood on my block, and I remember, you know, being young, the first time I saw crack, I'm like, what's that? Who's doing that? One of my homies' dads was one of the first people. But even before you get that, the 1970s had an era just due to, now we're finding out more about America's even involvement in it, like proliferation of cocaine. So cocaine, if people can kind of get into the scope of this, like cocaine, powdered cocaine, was looked at as something of opulence. It was something of like glamour. So almost the way that Jay-Z said, oh, have Cristal or something. Like it was seen as like a
Gucci,
glamour drug.
Gucci drug.
Like, you know, fur coats. It's like, oh, this is a good event. You know, you're going to walk in, people have on their best stuff. It'll be like you know, some cocaine there and everything. So when crack came, crack was like I want to say, for lack of a better term, like a poor man's version of it. It'd be like, almost like if, I don't know what if Rolex came up with a you know what I'm saying, like a
knockoff.
Here's the Rolex watch for you. Without people understanding. So that just due to, like, it's like, okay, I have a budget for crack. I don't have a budget for powder cocaine. I don't even know where you get that, but I can get my hands on this. And also, now that we're seeing the relationship furthermore between, I don't want to say our government or actors in our government supporting the Iran-Contra deal of, basically there were, let's just make it plain, of, you can read this, Darkwater, Gary Webb, Freeway, Ricky Ross. There was a war during this, like, I guess, America versus, you know, the Cold War conflict. And there were certain generals that were like, hey, we would like, you know, another $40 million in weapons. And then certain Congress people were like, nah, we're going to need to audit that and all of this. And a lot of those generals were like, we don't have time to do that because we have allegiances and contracts. We have relationships that need to stand in place. And if not, possibly our relationships may turn on us. We need to figure out other ways to get the money to fund our war efforts as generals. What's a good way that we think we can make some money? Why don't we start selling some drugs? And this, drugs, weapons, a lot of other stuff, this is what led to the proliferation, because it went hand in hand. And I will also argue that no one's done a documentary yet, but our American occupation of Afghanistan, which it was for years the world's biggest producer of poppy seeds, so opiums, coincided with this opioid epidemic happening here in America. So, like, that's just okay, this happened 20 years ago, and it's going to happen 20 years later as well. Like, monies in America have always not been on the up and up. As being black people, we're very aware of that. But I wanted to frame that so people kind of get an idea that it wasn't like, you know, some of this, there were a lot of actors that created crack being so impactful throughout black communities in America.
Yeah, I mean, it's like most things that we experience that are detrimental, right? It's like, it's nuance, right? It's like, who's to blame? You know what I mean? It's like, I spent a lot of time really, like, being upset only with the government, you know what I mean, for the role that the government played. But as I, you know, matured, I'm like, but where were we at? You know what I mean?
We played a hell of a...
Like, where were we at? Well, especially as you think about, like, once we saw what it was doing, like, to the community and to people, you know, so, again, it's nuanced, but I think one of the things that I because you think about our generation, right? And me being a little bit older than you, we didn't see crack be. It wasn't tempting to us, right?
No.
Like we had some people that fell off, and you like, man, what made you try that?
Yes,
right?
that's exactly how it was.
Because we knew what it was going. We knew what your outcome was going to be.
To use it,
yeah.
But to sell it, it was sold to us as like, oh, this is how you, as a young black man, can get a gateway because you won't have any other opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what's the classic Biggie line? You either slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So but the other thing that I thought was like really, really, because you have to ask, what made the generation before us fall into it so heavily, right? But if you think about it, it's not like they were shooting it in their arm, which, you know, like I always wonder what would make you try that. You know what I mean? And I realize that it escalates. It doesn't necessarily start with the needle, right? Yeah. But if you think about the way it's introduced, it's something that you smoke, right? And we've been smoking weed for generations. It's like now it's legal, so it's like it could appear to be non-threatening or not as serious.
Very much so. And furthermore, it was the glamorous thing of the day.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like you're thinking like, wow, I hear about all these parties at Studio 54. I'll never get my hands on powder cocaine. But this is basically the version of that I can get my hands on. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I mean, it would be the equivalent of like every celebrity you could think of, white, black, throughout ever. Like in the 70s, cocaine was just a known factor of throughout society, and even of that, you didn't see the quote unquote dark side of it. You just saw it as
it was like bottle service back then, right?
Yes.
It was like popping bottles.
Yeah, it was like, oh, we doing it big. We got a party where cocaine is. I mean, it's still parties like that, but now I believe that through media and attention, it's more awareness of what impacts this could have on you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's more awareness, and crack. Like we say, you know what I'm saying? That's where I think the onboarding of many, like you say, it's like smoking weed, but it's glamorous. You know what I'm saying? All the celebrities are doing this. I mean, I want to be like the celebrities. I want to pop bottles.
You try it and you gone.
You try it and you're gone.
Yeah.
And you're chasing these highs. And then like even for the people in my family, you know, I think that have struggled with different addictions, but especially that addiction, it becomes, from when I've had the conversations, like it becomes almost like a culture within a culture of itself, like a lot of things can become. Yeah. So the culture within the culture of itself is now you're the person at the job that, like, you know, if a group of, like, if let's say something healthy, like if a group of you and a couple coworkers like to walk, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Walk around the building at lunchtime.
Yeah.
Y'all kind of gonna become more close knit. Those same groups come from drug use as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. One of the things that I would like to point out, though, is like, because you think about, as we're talking about my origin story and my upbringing. So my dad, I think, started getting high when I was 7. So you know how the crack thing works in phases, right? It's like, you know, you don't start off strung out, or at least appearing to be strung out, even though you are, right? Yeah. But it's progressive in the way that it impacts your family, right? So it take the person that was like my hero and the strongest person, like my dad was like a real life, like X-Men, some of the stuff that like you would see him do, you know what I mean? And like this is his son talking about him, but like more so his peers. My dad didn't grow up far from here. So he grew up on, not Parkside, but what's the next street over from Parkside?
Parkside. That's
Wildermere. Is it Wildermere? Yeah. So and Finkel.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's from these parts.
Footprint.
Yeah. But took him to being like, you know, really, really frail and fragile and like, you know, like, yeah, just all the way from what you knew him to be to something totally different. But, you know, I remember my dad used to always tell us, yo, just pray for me because like he would say, I'm caught up.
Yeah.
And like, there ain't really nothing I can do about it, but like pray for me. And he would say that I knew if nobody else would pray for me, my kids would.
That's deep.
Right?
I mean,
and we did faithfully.
That's deep.
And 10 years later, like, 17, when I was like really, really frustrated, really like needing him to be there the way you need him to be there during those years, was when he was delivered. And I'm 30. No, I'm not 30 anything. I'm 49. So you're talking about, he been back for a long time, and he's that hero again to the whole family that we all call on, like if we need him for anything, and he's there just like he was before.
That's powerful, and then even in that journey, like it becomes when you're a child, life itself being heading into that teenage stage, you're questioning everything about life too. But in those understandings, because that's usually where you challenge your parents to be like, because you're rediscovering life.
Yeah.
But when you're rediscovering life as a parent is dealing with
an
illness like that,
yeah,
I can only imagine that has such a tougher impact on you in your interactions of just.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was super like loving. I mean, imagine how close we were. He was 16. You know what I mean? When he had his son, right? So. But he also was like demanded respect, right? Like he didn't play any disrespect. So, but to see him go through that, there were times when like I just didn't have the same level of respect for him, right? And like that, like really rocks me to this day when I think about that. When I was like, there were the moments when I like in my mind, if nothing else, even if I didn't express it so much outwardly, which I think I did at times, like to have moments in my life where I didn't respect him the way that I respect him now and I always was taught to, or the way I would want my kids to respect me, like that like stings now if I think about it and have flashbacks, So
as that's happening, and you said 17, in that path, and then, you're moving a little bit, become more transient as that's what things happen. Like,
for sure.
And do.
For sure.
What high school?
So I went to Redford.
Okay, you went to Red.
I went to Cody.
Okay, you bounced around.
I went to Denby.
Oh, and then you went east.
And I end up going to a school in Texas called Theodore Roosevelt.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, wow, another president.
Yeah.
How did you end up in Texas?
So I was bouncing from Redford to Cody to Denby. I was growing up in Brightmoor with my dad kind of in the streets, and it was Brightmoor in the 80s, and it was wild. And folks that you went from being your friends that you played, that you hooped with or played football in the street with, when you started to beef with each other, it would get really, really violent. And some really, really like ways that I'm like embarrassed to even talk about, right? And I was dealing with a lot of pain from my dad not being there the way that I knew him to be and what it could be. And that's like you, 15 years old, the man of the house in Brightmoor, and people will try you in Brightmoor. So my personality is the one that's like, okay, like I'll see you and I'll raise you, right? So in times where I would get tested, like I would be one of those people that would take it to like a place that you probably didn't want to take it to.
You were, as they say in quote unquote street rules or prison rules. It's like, if you think a fight is about to happen, strike first. That's what they say.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I don't, I mean,
if there's a chance,
it makes all the street logic in the world, but you would think it outside of living in environments like that, you'd be like, why would you do that? It's like, well, nope.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah. And I mean, and you couple that with having some experiences where, my dad was like, don't hit anybody unless they hit you first. And once you have a couple experiences where that don't go right, you're like, man, no, that's not
striking first.
Yeah. But then you couple that with the anger that I had that I didn't know how to process, right? That I was dealing with from the fact that he like wasn't there, and kind of watching my mom try to navigate and like provide for us with again like ninth grade education and no longer working at the factory. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I had a lot of anger that I didn't even know I was dealing with until I was an adult and able to look back and was like, oh man, like you was tripping and you was really angry and you didn't have a space to process that. You know what I mean? So I would just kind of like act out. So anyway, got into enough altercations to where, people tried to hurt me. I tried to hurt people.
Yeah.
And my mom wanted me to go live with my aunt and uncle in Texas when I was 15.
How close were you with your aunt and uncle before that move?
So my aunt was my mom's baby sister.
Okay.
So she has a twin brother, and they were 6 years older than me. So I kind of grew up like their little brother.
Okay.
And remember, I lived with them for my first 4 years before my mom and dad, got jobs at the plant and we moved out. So I was kind of like my aunt's little brother. Now, her husband is like one of the closest people to me, like right now to this day. And he married into the family, you know what I mean? And I'm like my Aunt Kim's little brother, but I would be real protective of her. And I never liked any boyfriend that she had.
Hilarious.
Ever, you know what I mean? Until him. Right.
And wait, time out. Let me say this. Yes, if you happen to be dating a young woman in Brightmoor, and she has the porch of brothers on the porch, make sure you're
gotta come right.
Make sure you have clear face, shake hands, speak directly. But okay,
come right. But yeah, so we were really close. My mom wanted me to go and live with her when I was 15, and this is when I was like really just kind of like, just on the wild.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go. And I remember, like there was some really, really like violent stuff that was happening. And, some people that, basically tried to kill me. And my mom wanted me to move out of state. I didn't want to go. And I remember I was packed up in the car with my aunt and uncle, and we were getting ready to get on the freeway, right at Greenfield, getting ready to get on 96. And I started to cry, right? And my uncle looked over and saw tears coming down my eyes, and he was like, "You don't want to go?" And I said, "No." And he said, "If I leave you, will you be safe?" And I said, "Those guys aren't like that." I was like, that their efforts failed, they're probably like hiding, wondering what retaliation is going to look like. So I'm not in danger, right? So he turned around, he made a U-turn, turned around, took me back, and he walked me back in the house with my stuff and told my mom, and we were everybody was gathered on my grandmother's house to see my aunt and uncle off because they would come for the summer. And he told my mom, he's like, "Look, like he doesn't want to go. So if he doesn't want to go, like I'm not going to take him." Right? And I really appreciated him for that. But fast forward 2 years later, I was tired of like, my own
exhausted of
I was just tired, man. I remember praying specifically and asking God to like send me some positive male role models. And my aunt and uncle came back up that summer, and I remember we was just kicking it, and it was just like one of those moments where everybody was gathered, and it was just two of us where only he could hear what I said. And I was like, "Hey, does that offer still stand to come back to San Antonio with y'all?" And he said, "You want to go this time?" He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "We leave such and such a date, And I had my stuff packed, ready to go. And I went, and living in San Antonio opened up my worldview, right? Like I only had Detroit, the blocks in Brightmoor and BET, right? And MTV and the jukebox, you know what I mean? Shaping the way I saw the world. And when I went there and got a chance to hang out, kick it with, meet people from all over with different perspectives, just my worldview was just broadened.
So I do want to frame up, especially like late '80s San Antonio. I immediately think you may have ran across Shaquille O'Neal, but
I used to, so we used to hoop. So
we definitely about to ask that question. But for people that don't know, Texas as they always say, it's like Texas is not a part of America. Texas is
They really believe that. Yeah.
It's a different culture, and it's a lot of different parts of Texas.
Yeah.
And right now, it's like more attention in and around because I believe like a lot of people I know are moving to Houston, Dallas. I mean, it's almost like a Detroit constituency in Dallas that it's like the D in Dallas.
There's groups called Detroiters in Dallas.
Yeah.
Like my oldest child, my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandson live in Dallas, or it's a suburb of Dallas right now.
And it's a different culture, but San Antonio is more so than like the Alamo, but it is a military town.
Yes,
it may be one of the biggest military cities, like San Antonio or San Diego. Either take a choice of like big time, like almost so much happens there and are grounded there and stationed there that it has an impact on the culture of the whole city.
Definitely.
What was it like just touching down and just being from Detroit? Because I know they can immediately tell you're not from around
here. You know that. Yeah. So it was definitely that, right? And it was just like a culture shock for me. So coming from Detroit, where it's so black, right? And I only knew black and white. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we didn't go to Southwest Detroit.
No.
You know what I mean? Like you kind of stayed in your neighborhood. You went to the east side where your great-grandmama lived. You know what I mean? And you would go hang out over there, but that's pretty much it. So being there, my uncle had to teach me the difference between like Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, like Asians that were from Korea, China, Japan. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he was like trying, and I was young and could be dismissive at times and insensitive, but he was like, look, like, you're going to be fighting a lot if you don't like respect other people's cultures. And I'm like,
I'm used to
you know what I mean? Like, like I think that, one, I didn't want to bring drama with me there. Yeah. And the people that he would hang out with, because he was in the Army, were just super cool. So you always wanted to respect them. He was. He was in the Army stationed at Fort Sam. So when I first moved there, we stayed in an apartment, like across the street from Theodore Roosevelt, the high school that I went to. Eventually got housing like on the Army base.
And I was going to ask that question too, because what is it like? Because I've met a lot of people that are in the military service, and I hear like, your family can stay here. What's it like to be a non-service member living on a military base?
Yeah, it's you're one of the only people walking around with a beard. You know what I mean? It's like I'm 17, and I'm walking around with a beard. Everybody else is clean shaven. But the cool thing was, you asked about Shaq.
Yeah.
So Shaq was in LSU when we moved on base, but his family lived about 3 doors down from us on Fort Sam, right? Shaq had a sister with a jerry curl that was like 13, like 6'2", 6'3".
Whoa.
Out there playing with 13-year-olds. You know what I mean? Okay. It was crazy, but he would come home on holiday break and whatnot and come up and hoop up at the on the Army base.
Okay, now, did you ever? You know where I'm about to go with this.
What?
Because I see you setting it up. Because, Shaq tell them stories like, I couldn't dunk when I was in 9th grade and all that. By that time, LSU Shaq.
Shaq was a beast.
Mahmoud, Chris Mahmoud, I knew around
3% body fat. And it was interesting because, like, I mean, you on an Army base with people from all over the country, right? So guys up there really would, like, try to act like they would be playing hard when he coming up there to work on a part of his game. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So they up there like, in their mind, if I could score on Shaq, I could be in the NBA or, you know what I'm saying? I could be D1 or whatever. So you would see that happening. And the thing about it was he was so big that he could take them, hacking them and all that, and it really didn't bother him. But I'll tell y'all an embarrassing story that I really don't talk about. I can't believe I'm about to tell this story. So I was 17 at the time. And you know how, like, between pickup games, everybody's shooting around.
Yeah.
So between one of the pickup games, I went and kind of put my back on Shaq and act like I was posting them up. and started calling for the ball. So I did like this, I got him like this, kind of like I got him pinned. So now Shaq is only 2 years older than me.
How tall are you at this time?
I'm 6'1". I'm 6'1". So Shaq like takes his left hand, right, and his left arm and kind of picks me up by my waist and lift me up from standing in front of him like I'm posting him and sits me behind him, right, just with one hand. Man, I was I was so mad and felt so violated when he did that. I was like, don't do that no more. As if I was gonna do something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But I'm like,
you definitely
don't do that. You know what I mean?
Because it's like, if he just did that, I don't think throwing.
Yeah, no. It's like, but yeah, I would have been too quick for him to hurt me. But yeah, that's how strong he was. It was interesting because he had they lived down the street, so when he would come home for the holiday, he would come down and he had like this Grand Cherokee that you could tell that the seat was like made to fit him, so it was sitting in the back. He was really down to earth and cool and would just like kick it. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder and wanted to make sure he didn't think I was trying to like
juice him.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So we never really kicked it, even though he was really cool, down to earth, and anytime he was you catch him coming down the street, he'd be like, "What's up?" You know what I mean? And I just never wanted him to think that like I was one of the people trying to like
get something,
because you will see that around, like So
I'd assume so. So from there, you come back to Detroit. Was it always in mind, like when you got there, that I'm gonna go back to the D? Did you ever think? You're on Army base. Did you ever think maybe I do? Maybe I soldier. At that time, also,
I considered it.
I know Desert Storm comes almost like immediately.
Yeah.
And it's funny, one of my older cousins was dating a guy, and then the next thing you know, Desert Storm popped off, and it's like, he's about to be deployed as a soldier. And like, how you look up to your cousin's boyfriend, like, I'm a kid. So it's like, wow, for real? And you know what I'm saying? But so I'm sure that, maybe he was deployed. I don't know. Like
No. My uncle's a scientist. He's a scientist. He's a brainiac, but he doesn't. He doesn't come across that way. In fact, he don't even talk about like what he does by vocation. And I'm always on him about that. I'm like, look, man, like your nephews and nieces need to know like what it is that you do. Like he is, and I'm probably gonna jack it up, but he is one of the places like on the globe that trains people to deal with disease outbreak, but also chemical warfare, right? So like they help put together like a plan to contain, right?
So he's like an epidemiologist.
I don't even know the name, so, but he's the man there now. He's been doing that type of work since I was living with them way back when. But to answer your question, I thought about it at one point, right? And truth be told, like I got in trouble and got kicked out of all high schools in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, you were bouncing around down there too.
Well, I couldn't bounce around. I was like, at that point, I thought about just getting a GED and joining the Army. And man, you getting all kind of like stuff that I don't even talk about. I ain't even shared nowhere publicly yet. I'm just waiting on the book. But
it's the training different as a precursor.
But yeah, so when I ended up getting into a fight with some gang members there and got kicked out of school for like all of the schools. That was like some that was nuanced again, right?
Yeah.
Like my fault. Like definitely my fault because I could have avoided like the conflict to begin with, but there was.
But the way
somebody,
the
way that they penalized me
was the way the discipline was doled out.
Yeah, I'd never been in any trouble before.
Understanding that with the testosterone in boys, like you and I, we're men. We know, like we know if we you know, if me and you do a Detroit is Different Black Leaders Detroit retreat where we take 100 little homies that are between the ages of 14
You're gonna break
and
some
17.
stuff up. You're gonna have to break some stuff up.
It's just gonna happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So with that, you have to keep that in mind and be fair and balanced in how you dull it out.
And
we
that's
can't
not what
have
happens.
like one of our camp advisors' sons be like, all right, you know what? Just apologize to him. And then we go to the other kid and we be like, look, we about to kick you out and we about to press charges on you and we about to make sure that you know.
I had some good teachers there.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a culture that you described when you talk about like Texas not wanting to be part of the U.S.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I never forgot this. One of my teachers caught me in the hallway. She knew I was from Detroit. She caught me in the hallway. White woman, and she said, "Hey, I have a joke that I want to tell you." And she's smiling and she's like, can't wait to say it. And she's like, well, you got to promise not to get offended. So I'm like,
okay,
okay.
That's already weird.
Yeah, right. So she said, what are 3 things that a Texan hates to see coming?
Oh, shit.
Right. So she
that
said,
already seems like it's about to go left.
She said, a Mexican with a knife, a nigga with a gun, and a Yankee with a U-Haul truck. Right. And she just busted out laughing.
Damn.
Right. So like understanding the power dynamics there with her being my teacher. And I really wanted to call her some choice words.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? And that was one of the moments that kind of like shapes the way that I move now. Like
so much different than an all black Detroit.
Exactly.
And then being a kid hearing that.
Yeah. Right.
It's different than being as an adult. I'm not saying that it don't bother you, but it's like, well, I mean, what do you expect? You know what I'm saying?
But the thing that I do now is I always address issues that make me feel uncomfortable in real time. Right. So I never. So like you could, as you can imagine, many of us have had that experience where at that night you can't even sleep because you're like, man, I wish I would have said this. Or I wish I would have did this. You know what I mean? If they do that again, this is what I'm going to do next time. You know what I mean? Yeah. I never have those kind of nights now because I always say what I feel or what I'm thinking in the moment. So I think that's one of the things that kind of like shapes the way that I move and I navigate when people do something that's offensive, even if it's by accident. Of course, I deal with it differently if it's somebody doing something that offends me out of ignorance versus somebody that's intentionally trying to be offensive, right? But I always deal with it in real time. My thought is, if I'm going to be made to feel uncomfortable, we might as well both be uncomfortable.
I'm with it. Yeah, and it takes a while to get to that point, especially when you're a child. Like, how do you respond to that? You know, I got a nephew in L.A. that's dealing with, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was just called nigga for the first time not too long ago in the school.
How old is he?
He is 11, about to be 12 in February. He's going to he's changed school. He was at more, I guess, the select schools. Now he's more in a community school where it's a predominantly, and then you can't just say a Mexican school because it's even different. It's different, cultures within Mexican, especially in a place like LA. It's not just Mexican. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's different cultures even within that. So it's, so in that and how you respond to stuff like that, it takes, it censors you different.
Yeah, man.
And his response, and I thought it was good for an 11-year-old. His response was tomorrow I want to wear my Black Lives Matter shirt. I was like, okay, that's very, you know what I'm saying? That's a great response.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that, in that journey, so you come back to Detroit, and Lord knows, and we're gonna pick up with another interview because this is is very interesting.
I see what we're looking at time wise.
Yeah. So you do have in mind, I'm coming back to Detroit. Why? Because at that point, especially, and that's the other thing about being cool with military people, is they're traveling the world. Sometimes a person, you're hearing about Germany, you're hearing about France. You at that point, I assume you've heard about so much more.
Oh, definitely.
Even the Shaquille O'Neals, the O'Neal family. You can walk over there like, oh, you ain't never been to Hamburg, you ain't never been to, Kazakhstan. Like, it's a gateway to hear about the world. Yeah. But you come back to the D.
Yep. Yeah. And on that point, my closest friend, Matt, was a Mexican dude who had moved to San Antonio from Germany because his mom was in the Army, right? And Matt, shout out Matt, his nickname was Spray. He used to rock a high top fade that he must have used like a can of hairspray to get it ready every day. He had a high top fade as tall as kids from Kid and Play. And but to your point, back to your question, I think moved back to Detroit after things just didn't work out there. And in fact, I was supposed to just come back to Detroit for the summer and end up staying.
Okay.
And
but that's still something, because now you have ideas and point of access to so much more.
Oh yeah.
And to even choose to stay says a lot.
Yeah. Well, I miss my family and my friends here a lot. Right, like I love my family, and I was away from my sisters, away from my mom, and all my friends that I had. But being away, I think, really gave me an opportunity, like you said, to see other things, to have exposure, and understand that the world was a lot bigger than the stuff that was happening in my little neighborhood or other neighborhoods that I would hang out in because of friends and family around the city, right? And definitely, like the thing about going to school in Detroit, where I went to school and when I went to school, now, granted, I had peers at Redford, which would really be my kind of my home school. Like, I had peers at Redford that was about their business, right? But most of the people that I was hanging out with, like, it was cool. The more you didn't care, the cooler you seemed to be. And the more people seem to respect you or admire you. So that's kind of the character or persona that I took on when I was here. I'm a really competitive person, right?
Yeah.
So I went to San Antonio. My peers were competing academically. So all the kids wanted to look at your report card to make sure that they outdid you, right, in the classes.
Wow.
So that became the reality. So now it's like I'm trying to study for the first time, right? And I was always the type of student that picked up, I could learn really well, right, and fast. And learning didn't come hard to me. I just
didn't put the effort in.
Exactly.
So at that, and I know I'm placing this on you, and this goes right into, as we wrap talking about Black Leaders Detroit, at that point, are you seeing it like, if my homies could just get hip to this culture, then it changes the reality for Detroit? And I know I'm putting that in your mind, but like, was that kind of some of what was starting to form at that point in time?
It didn't start to form just yet, right? Because I put myself so far behind, like academically, that I just wasn't really prepared and set up for success.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, everybody was graduating, going off to college. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I'm working doing stock at ABC Warehouse, you know what I mean? And I just knew that they were all going to come home. Like, so now my peers are like, they've graduated and they're in school. So I know that they're coming home with a degree and a career. And I was like, man, I can't be doing stock. You know what I'm saying? When they come home, and I can't be like the person that's working these dead-end jobs. Like, I need to learn how to do something. And I ended up getting into construction and learning skilled trades. And my mind's always worked in shapes, dimensions, and problem solving. So I started taking up carpentry and got decent at it. but I think that I'm wired to be an entrepreneur as well. So ended up, doing that for a while. And the thing was, it just opened up different doors for me, and what I realized is as long as you know how to do something, like if you are looking for a job, the job's looking for you too. And I think that's the position I was in after I started that part of my journey.
So, and I speak about Black Leaders Detroit because it's such a needed business model, and then your attitude and optimism, I feel like so much in it, as much as you definitely speak to systemic racism and everything, but your optimism has always been, every time I've connected with you, has been almost built in and around the concept of look, if you present it right, you put it on paper right, it's not even an option to move around the momentum that we have as a people.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I know you we got to fast forward and get to this now, but it's I appreciate the conversation, man. The reason I was looking forward to it, but it's when I started getting into nonprofit work, especially if you're talking about structure, my observation was oftentimes we start initiatives and we're practitioners, right? So we start nonprofits to solve the problem that we dealt with, right? That we were fortunate enough to overcome.
Yes.
And we're trying to scale it. We don't call it that, right? But we're trying to scale it. We're okay, let me go and show others how to beat this thing that was tearing my family up or I fell victim to, or whatever the case may be. Let me go and show others how to do it. And we often dive in with our own experience, passion, abilities, and bank account, right? And it would
be if for that, he said, if from hearing his story, if he started a foundation right now where it's look, I'm taking 17-year-old little homies where we going to go on 2-month expeditions in the summertime, where we going to pick different cities where we think that economy is starting up. Yeah. And it's who going to pay for that?
Exactly.
I'm going to pay for that first.
That's it. My first initiative, Kyrie, was a home that was kind of family home that I ended up buying from my father and my stepmother. And I turned that house, it was investment property. I had somebody that was working at Chrysler, living there, paying me every month. And I took that house and felt like God was telling me to do something different with it, and started to use that house for a transition house for young men in that neighborhood that wanted to stop selling drugs.
Wow, so this is almost this is that story that, I said.
This is it, bro. This is it.
That was exactly that.
So took the house, and me and a friend of mine, shout out Hemp, we would go around to local drug houses, knock on the door, and ask for whoever was leading it and say, hey, and we'll talk to them and say, look, if there's anybody here that you know's not cut out for this, send them with us. Or if there's anybody here that's tired of trying to make this work and they want to try something else, send them with us, right? And we would have daily prayer and Bible study with them. But at the time I was working at Ford and doing construction work. And I would take them out and try to teach them a trade. And if I didn't have work for them, I would connect them with other contractors that I'd work with and have them work with them.
Now, wait. Let me give this disclaimer, too. And I've had to do this on another interview, too, for somebody else. The work that he's doing is so powerful, trades like that. Now, if you're watching that, you better have had some street knowledge to know how to walk up on a spot.
Oh, yeah.
In a missionary capacity. Yeah. Really, in any capacity, all right? Yeah. So I just want to get that disclaimer.
I'm not suggesting anybody go
that's all I'm saying.
So
don't feel that's something that's a program that we can do, and you have no street experience. And when I mean street experience, I'm not talking about your cousin is in the streets. You better have a great understanding of that culture.
For sure. I mean, remember I said my family was from that neighborhood, so all those guys that were doing that, I'd either looked out for them in some kind of way. They knew that the love was there and the respect was there. Yes. And they know I wasn't coming like, hey, I'm about to call the police on you or anything like that. It was like, hey, I understand y'all making tough choices. You know what I mean? You don't think that there's other options. And I'm just wanting to say there are other options. Let me introduce you to one. You know what I mean? And the one is not just necessarily carpentry. For me, it's Jesus. You know what I mean? Because like that's what ultimately like really, really works for me. And you know, you don't hear me like preach or anything like that. I'm more like trying to follow the commandment to love. That's what I try to do. You know what I mean?
Which is still a way of welcoming a person in to follow that, because to me it's the best way, especially dealing with brothers like, you know, brothers in our community. Because it's going to be hard because we've been pitched the whole
I'm not trying to hear that.
The best way is like, he moved cool, he seemed cool, I like how he get, man, what's your source, where you getting your water from? And it's like, hey, this is my game.
And
then that make a brother step back and say, okay.
Yep, for sure. So that was it. So fast forward, ran that house, Westwood and Schoolcraft, for 5 years, and was doing it out of me and my wife's budget, man. And you know, 06 hit. I took the buyout from Ford, started my company officially, and ran it. And then 08, the bottom fell out, so it was really, really rough. But I was still able to manage it for another few years, right? And I had to shut the doors after 5 years of running it out of our own bank account, putting a new roof on it, new furnace in there, making sure that the bills were always paid and whatnot, and just couldn't sustain it.
And Dwan is definitely saying the functional things. I've ended up with, I don't know, you know, this just happened in the community. I have extra space. I've definitely let a person stay.
Oh yeah, you're talking about all that.
It's going to be other challenges. One of the key challenges usually as a person that's finding their footing. One thing I found, as people find footing, one thing they don't have problems with is finding love. And sometimes the interpersonal relationship.
Oh my goodness, bro.
I'm just throwing that out there for the other person that may got this on their heart. You got to know how to even manage that, because, you know, these grown people, so you can't say, hey, yo, man, you can't be hooking up with people and you need a place to stay. You got to...
Bro, like you was there, wasn't you? You was there. You were there, bro. You was there. Like, wait, you was there. Oh, my goodness, man. But also having multiple brothers there that are from, like, that. Yeah. That walk of life. Yeah. And having to come over there at 12 o'clock in the morning from my warm bed, and my wife like, where you going? You know what I mean? Got to go over here and break up, you know what I mean? An altercation, you know what I'm saying? You got
girlfriend parked in my girlfriend.
Bro, like it's all kind of stuff. Like, you making me have flashbacks, bro.
Like, yo, man.
But the thought of shutting that down when I know the impact that it was having.
Yes.
Right? When I ended up working at Life Remodeled, one of the things I really wanted to understand and learn was how some of the white-led nonprofits raise so much money and so much momentum, right? And I got a great education there, right? Like, Chris knows how to run a nonprofit well. He knows what it takes to raise money, and I was able to get a really good education there, right? Like, you know, I think that he'll tell you how much I taught him about working in Detroit and across cultural divides. But, like, make no mistake about it, like, the stuff that y'all, like, that I get to do and you see me doing is because, like, I was a student, like, in the class there. You know what I mean? And the thing about it, what I really appreciated about Chris is that he was never intimidated by, like, talent or ambition. You know what I mean? So it's not like he would you hear brothers that work in skilled trades at the plant often say when they came and started working in skilled trades or became a tech, the white dude that was already doing that job would have them go get coffee while they did the, like, intricate part of the job, so that when they come back, it'll take them forever to learn and understand. Like, Chris did the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, he always had me there when he was raising money with the big check writers, right?
And, I mean, and that happens sometimes. I mean, it's weird because, you know, people be like, it's black people too, and I've been the person to say some of that as well, because some of this, just due to this society, forces us to be that way. Almost, it's competitive. It's here we go, another Kobe and Shaq. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when you see someone else with talent and young, and you're thinking like, this person will start on their own, this is putting you, it puts you, some people embrace that. I mean, I feel like I embrace competition. If you can get me to, and Dwan's definitely that. Dwan is going to press you. He's going to want your best because that's where he wants to function. Because I think it's back to the athletics of it. If he starts accepting slipping, he's going to start slipping because he's going to be like, well, at least I'm one step ahead of him. And then you play a team that's a real team and you like, damn, I thought we were good.
Yeah, and we have it in us. You know what I mean? We have it in us. So it's like either we're going to accept like the bare minimum from each other, or we're going to challenge each other, right? I'd rather somebody challenge me and say, yo, Dwan, I think you got more to give than that. You know what I mean? And that's the type of team that we have at Black Leaders Detroit. So I'll talk about Black Leaders Detroit a little bit.
Yeah.
We are a funding vehicle for black entrepreneurs operating in the city of Detroit. So we fund nonprofit and for-profit organizations or businesses, right? And we do that two ways. We have grants and we do a no-interest loan. That's right, I said no-interest loan. So we launched the no-interest loan this year in January with the goal of doing $500,000 in loans, our largest product being $20,000, and we are on track to hit that goal. We will be approving about $148,000 in loans on Friday, hopefully, which we're at $352,000 already dispersed. So that $148,000 will get us right to that $500,000 goal. And I'm excited about that, and I can't wait to let everybody know what we have in store for next year, because that's just scratching the surface. This pilot year, right? So we're just getting started. But that was a response to me having to close the door on Westwood, right? It's like if we had the resources there, we could have continued to do the work, have the impact, right? And I think that we see so many black entrepreneurs that either are running like shops, stores, you name it, and they're struggling to keep the doors open, struggling to keep staff because they don't have the same access to capital as some of our white colleagues, right? Definitely. Like I don't walk in and get the benefit of the doubt that Chris would, right? Yeah. But if I can come in already showing impact, then like for us, a few things happened that really, really worked well for us, right? Terrible for the families, right? And I'm talking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, right? And then the young folks that were protesting and making sure that there was a mirror held up to us as a nation, right? And they protested in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So those things happening took organizations and made them figure out how to align with black-led organizations. And we were in line to have those relationships and take them to the next level and really benefit from it financially. So we've raised a decent amount of money from the foundation, philanthropic community, corporations and whatnot. But you know that's not our long-term approach to raising money.
And let me say this, as I give, Give Tuesday happened not too long ago. I gave to a lot of different organizations. But before Give Tuesday, I gave to Black Leaders Detroit. I told them before, I know I'm cutting some of the pitch, but I want you to definitely pick up with this. In this, and I'm finding is like, Detroit is different. Community group is a baby nonprofit, but I'll have a lot of business experience from who my father as a CPA is, grandfather as a club owner, my other grandfather, my mom ran a flower shop. Like, it's something to when you can get independent capital that it's one of the weirdest things. It's like you can get money if you don't need money. And that sounds very odd, kind of like swing first. But that's like the business version of swinging first. If it shows that it's lucrative and it's a locomotive, like if it shows that the train is going to be out the station no matter what, whatever form of investment or giving, almost, people are more confident in it. Yeah. Because oftentimes it's a lot of projects where, great projections, great ideas, great theories. But if basically you present to me a package where it's like, yo, plan is perfect. I just need your $50,000. And it's like, how much money have you given? Not a damn thing. Then it's like, okay, so basically what you're saying is I'll give you this 50,000, and most people know this. The project probably, when I do budgets, I make a budget and I multiply it by 1.33, meaning that whatever I thought it was is probably going to be 33% more than whatever it is.
Most people will like try to subtract the 0.33 and say, well, I can do it for less than what it really costs to do it because that's not going to scare people off if I tell that. You know what I mean?
If I'm a philanthropist, or let's just say you're just a person that wants to do good. You know what I'm saying? You just want to see something positive. I want to see that it can happen.
Yeah.
You sometimes want that track record. Hence, it is imperative of us as a community to support efforts like Black Leaders Detroit, like in so many Black Leaders Detroit, and so many of Detroit. Detroit is different. Like if we support our own communities with our own money, it makes it so much easier for us to raise money because it's like, oh, we got a proven track record. We have, even if the people that are giving are all giving 50 cents. Because it shows that I have a database of 700,000 people that all gave 50.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, right? So I'm excited about an initiative that's happening. I think it's coming next year in June. Blacks in Philanthropy. So shout out to Colin Mays and the teams that's putting that on. You should definitely have him on the podcast
let's
too.
Do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, but I just want to really look into the camera and tell people like we need you, right? I think that's part of the story that's often not told that way. I think we see ourselves in a posture of needing so much that that's the way we talk about us. And what we ask people to do at Black Leaders Detroit is to donate $1 a week. Right, $52 a year, $4.33 a month, whichever way is most suitable for you. And we're changing the face of the hero. So we want to tell the story that like it was you that helped us disperse. We're at $900,000 dispersed to Black entrepreneurs so far, and we're just scratching the surface. And that's because you either believe in us and we'll continue, or you don't believe in us and we'll stop. Right, but if we can't depend on like people like you to donate $1 a week, these foundations won't continue to write 6-figure checks to us. So we hope that you would do that at blackleadersdetroit.org.
And I'm gonna go a step further. And I already told, because he hired one to talk about people that push you. He hired my homie Sharia. You guys are familiar with Sharia.
Shout out to Sharia.
But I'm gonna go a step further. I'm going to match, I want to do 10 people. So meaning that 10, you give your $52, Detroit is different, will give $520. You know what I mean? And that's going to start for 2023. 2024, we're going to get up to 20. And so forth and so on. And I think I can get some other organizations to jump on board with these types of initiatives to think about it. You know, everybody, you know, when we were all getting our stimulus and some PPP loan money, everybody had these susus going, which always, like I told people, it's like, man, I support you. This theory being that I know a lot more about economics will never work, but it's like, look, brother, here you go. Just because, you know, I'm not signing
and I'm out.
Not a damn person, but here you go. You know, but if since I can do that, I think I can get something like this going, which it will actually see that investment back in our communities. Yeah. So, and knowing, you know, like, and this is all interrelated. Marini is going to do something, a Kwanzaa camp for children connected because now she won a grant through Black Leaders Detroit out of just, you know what I'm saying? So it's things like that. And she's somebody that definitely has a lot of information about engaging students in information, onboarding them. And it's like, how is she going to get things going for her project and her programming? And I'm not saying it would be impossible, but now it's like, oh, I didn't even expect that to be coming on me. Now it lays on me. I get to get out some game and some to work with some little homies, and you all with that are parents and stuff like that. You know that your kids are usually in school and they out of school for a whole week. You still want to go to work or kick back or do whatever. Now you got something. This is all interrelated. It's all community.
That's it.
Because she had the money from Black Leaders Detroit to execute this Kwanzaa program to teach children. Now you can have your house in peace instead of kids jumping around and stuff like that.
No doubt.
And then they're getting rich information that we need from a master teacher in our community. This is, to me, how things happen. And it's better than just, giving blindly and not knowing what, how, and where. You're gonna see and know the people with these projects, which actually the community itself will start holding those projects accountable.
That's it.
When they don't get out the train station, because sometimes that happens, and it's all right, brother, did you consider this, did you consider that? Let's make sure you get out the train station next time. And we're not necessarily saying that because everything ain't a conspiracy or a scam or whatever. Sometimes it's just difficult.
That's it. It.
And that's the community we want. And that's why it was so important, because actually in knowing Dwan, it was Suzanne, my lead captain of Detroit is Different, that was like, have you seen information about this? And I was like, that's Dwan. And then I got more information about it and how it functions. And all I was thinking was like, we can have so many people giving $1 a week. Yeah. Almost like where we don't even think about it. And that's going to be something that Detroit is Different can engage with, because as much as I love the concept, I love the idea, I don't have the apparatus for lending, and I don't feel like hiring the team to go through getting the SEC controls and all of that stuff. Lending is a whole entity. They've done it. You know what I'm saying? The wheel is already rolling. We need to support that wheel, and Detroit is Different needs to stay in our media world how we do.
Yeah. And
Black Leaders Detroit can deliver on that. And I can now with pride tell a lot of businesses, because it's a lot of business people that's like, hey, man, how do you get some money? How do you get some money? And I think most of my lending straight up for the people still in the streets sometimes. I get a lot of street lending. I know a lot of street dudes still, and I can get points, and it's more fair. And it's always been more fair.
Yeah.
And I know, as we know with a lot of black businesses, even going back to the street, to the numbers game. And that was a big lending institution for most black newspapers, businesses, period, because, we're not getting that lending.
That's it.
So if you're out the loop and you don't know any of these people, and a lot of those people that you think got a lot of money probably don't have a lot of money.
Right.
It's usually the people that you think don't have money that have a lot of money because they're good at saving.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And this can open up the opportunity where now with pride I can say, hey, call up Black Leaders Detroit. And then it's going to go through a process where you will not just be there for your loan or your grant. You'll be set up because they're going to decode it to say, all right, now you're at a point where you can go down the street to Chase. And we're not saying that Chase going to say yes or Bank of America going to say yes, but we've checked all the boxes off that we could. We've exerted we've turned over all the stones that we do have control over.
Yep. I mean, one of the things that we experience is that people come to us that haven't and wouldn't apply in other places, because oftentimes we feel like that money's not for us anyway, right? Yeah. So when they realize that we are set up for them specifically, they are willing to come and at least start the application process. Mm-hmm. So we're getting people to the table that even if they're not prepared, now we can help them, point them in the right direction and say, hey, here's who you should be talking to get you ready to come right back to us ready. And then, like you said, the next step is now you should be able to go to one of these banks and these other traditional lenders. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man, I really think I have the best job in the city.
I love
it. You know what I mean?
And I want it, and I'm pitching, now it's like reverse where I'm like priping this up, and y'all know I prop up people sometimes, but I really propping up this project because after I understood it, also my understanding of business from my dad being a CPA and me doing taxes for so long, and as my dad always says, like when you look at the numbers of a business and the tax returns and preparing them, it's like you're lifting up the hood of what's going on. From lifting up the hood, a lot of people you think they got a lot of money really don't. Meaning, like, yes, they have a lot of money, but they also have a lot of expenses. So that happens. But also that he came from the construction background. And to do construction, you need to have such a great understanding of lending to scale up, because to do construction, eventually you're going to be dealing with like government entities. When dealing with government entities and procurement, you may be waiting, 3-4 years.
In Detroit,
you may wait 3-4 years.
In Detroit, it's hard. It's hard. Let's just say that. Yeah. Like I remember when I was doing projects for the city, the person that was inside the city said, "Look, Detroit put a lot of good contractors out of business because sometimes you have to wait for your money. But the thing about my construction background and my, being a GC that helped with what we do, because I don't have a finance background, right? Like I didn't grow up at the table with a CPA.
Well, technically, you didn't grow up with that, but you have the
best
experience from the other side, which is what we need our people to have. And I'm not saying that having to find
no, it's the team though, right?
Yes,
like as a GC, that's what you did.
Yes,
right. As a GC, general contractor, what I mean when I say GC, you identify the specialist and you get them on the team. So when I was a general contractor, I didn't need to be an electrician.
No.
I just needed a really good electrician.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that I learned after a couple years in the game was that I never really wanted to have a guy that I can do it all.
No.
Right? I like specialists. Like, this is all I do. Right? So what I learned was my tile guy he did tile yesterday, he gonna do tile today, tomorrow, and he been doing tile for the last 20 years.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the only person I want laying tile for me, right? I don't want somebody that can do framing and drywall, tape it and mud it. I want somebody he's a framer, that's all he do, that's all his crew does is frame. That's it. My drywall, like him or her, that's all they do is hang drywall. And the people that come and finish it, that's all they do is finish it, right? And that's the same thing that approach that I take to building anything that I build. So when we wanted to put together our plan for the no interest loan, we connected with an organization called Hebrew Free Loan. They've been doing no interest loans in the Jewish community for 127 years. We got their blueprint. I work closely with a dude named David Contour. We become really good friends. He's the executive director there. They gave us the blueprint and will answer a call if we have any questions. We took some tools that they use at Invest Detroit, right? And we put that stuff put it together, created a hybrid model, and made it a better fit for the black community, and rolled it out. And we have a dynamic loan officer, Kevin, who will help you get across the finish line as long as you stay engaged. And Ken, our COO, who was one of my founding board members, helped me take this from an idea and turn it into an organization, came on staff in 2021 and manages a team. You already mentioned Sharia Ayers, who every time somebody finds out that she's on the squad, they're like, yeah, so, and then Jared, who he oversees our storytelling, right? Jared's a gifted writer. That's his gifting, right?
That's amazing.
Jared had never written a grant before, so I asked him, man, would you be interested in learning how to write grants? Connected him, a gifted grant writer who understands Black Leaders Detroit story, and had him train under some professional grant writers. And Jared has written over $2 million in grants that we've either received or is in the queue, and we're waiting on the money to come in.
That's powerful.
Right?
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would say, and I guess this may be the entrepreneur, because as much as my dad's the CPA, this may be more of the Don Scott, my granddad in me. Sometimes I think with business, get out there and start. You know what I'm saying? That's the best lessons you can learn. So being that, and I mentioned that you serving as a general contractor, because when you're on projects like that, time and money matter so much that you have to be clear about it. It's not like other work. So you know what it's like to be like, okay, you need your money now. Because it's more than, I need this line of credit. It's like, I need this line of credit to start tomorrow. Because a crew of union, a crew of union, the IBEW will be coming over here tomorrow. And if I ain't got their money, then I can't move forward with this project.
It's a problem.
And I am a subcontractor of this hub zone, opportunity zone developed thing where they brought me in, and I have the responsibility of that. And if you're not really on that and knowing how to, speak up about that, then I don't think you're going to be successful in that business.
Yeah.
So being in that business, that's where like I tip my hat to, you know, brothers like Tom Hardiman and those that do it well. And Detroit has a lot of them. Not enough, as far as I'm concerned, getting the opportunities they need with this quote-unquote redevelopment of Detroit. But that's another discussion. But it's enough that you know what it's like to really need that lending versus a person that's in a position that would like. Because needing it and would like it are two totally different boats. And it's not like saying the person that would like it may not get it either, but it's like, you know, you can get that ship in motion. Hence why I say the best way to start your business is to start your business, because some of those other solutions start presenting themselves as you start your business versus being in theory about your business.
And some of those problems teach you, right? They say that the best lesson is a bought lesson, right? You know what I mean? It's like bumping your head, right? If you don't bump it hard enough, you're probably gonna bump it again. If you bump it hard enough, you're like, I'm gonna make sure I duck next time. You know, a lot of things that I learned is because of mistakes I made when running the business, you know. But I understand it at a high level now, right? And I'm able to even offer some advice to entrepreneurs from a position of humility, because I'm not saying it because I learned it and I was a master at it. I'm able to share this because I failed here or I messed up here. You know what I mean? But yeah.
And the other thing about the contractors I know that have been in that game decade plus, they also recognize, and this is very tough to hear, especially in our community, because I think a lot of us are consumers, money has a very strong diminishing return. Meaning you're thinking that 100,000, like you're thinking that, wow, I got 100,000, so I can hire the best person. You're thinking that you're going to get a exponential effort from this quote unquote best, whatever, event planner, grant writer, whatever you need in your business. No, it sometimes doesn't happen like that. And when I say diminishing return is usually the arc of how people look at money, hence it's an asset, like any other asset. The arc of how people consume money is like, they will buy what they want, and then at that point, you're probably going to get whatever their natural productivity is. So it's not like just because you got a bunch of money now and you throw it on the table, you're going to turn a person that's used to showing up late, not being responsive. You're thinking that, if I give them enough money, then obviously I'm going to get a better worker. No, probably the opposite is going to happen. You know, so that's why I like him. You know, it's like knowing the background of some of these different jobs and business experience puts someone that worked in general because that job you're always working. You got to have like a flow of knowing people skills and knowing how things go, and you probably just can pull a lot of businesses to the side and be like, look, I know you think you need 15 G's to do this, but in reality, I don't think you need that much. I don't think you need that. You probably need, because what you're saying you want this 15 G's for is you say, I'm going to hire a marketing person. And when I hire a marketing person, I got the best cupcakes in town. So I assume that this 15 G's with my cousin friend that's a social influencer and Instagram, it helped her get all of this money. So I figured I take this same money, get that 15 G's to them, my cupcakes blow up. You'll be like, nah, that's probably not what you need to do. You can probably pound the pavement.
It's interesting because the way that we're set up is we have entrepreneurs having conversations with entrepreneurs, and sometimes it works out well where somebody's in the same industry and they can say it even better, right? If somebody come through and they're a construction person, then we speak the same language, but you mentioned cupcakes, right? So April Anderson from Good Cakes and Bakes is on our funding board. So
April, she comes in soon too. It's like we all in the same family.
She is phenomenal, man. Like the way that she engages with entrepreneurs in a very like loving, supportive way, but also like she has a finance background. She worked in corporate America, so she's able to talk to them and like in a really, really sensitive way, offer up advice and help them avoid some things that they were probably going to like pitfalls, and I think that she also really understands when people are ready to hear that and when they're not, and then she'll like pull back from offering it up in the moment. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate that part about what we do as well, is the engagement with other people that there's no doubt that these people want to see you win, right? These are other black entrepreneurs operating in Detroit that love black entrepreneurs, and they really, really want to see you win. So the way that we're kind of organically forming a community, entrepreneurs that like are supportive of one another, that's just an added bonus that we didn't even realize was going to happen. You know what I mean?
That's powerful. So we're going to close. Man.
This is good, bro.
Classic Detroit. Detroit is different questions now. Very first car, year, make, and model. What year did you get it?
I had a Chrysler Newport.
Oh, man, I never even heard of it.
Bro, like it was a Chrysler Newport. I think it was a 73, the same year I was born.
A Chrysler Newport.
And I bro, it was one of those things. It was just a raggedy car, and that was old. But I thought it was like I was going to turn it into a classic. But you see how you never even heard of it? There's a reason you never heard of it. Bro, like you couldn't tell me I wasn't about to turn that into a classic and put some rims on it and do everything. That car was raggedy. The mug, bro. But yeah, that was my very first whip.
Where was the first place you went when you got it?
Man, where was the first place that I went? Oh man, maybe my Uncle Tyrone's house, who lives on the east side. I think I picked it up, paid $300 for it.
Whoa!
$300.
Oh man, that's like a personal purchase. You probably didn't have no tags, no nothing. You was just riding.
I wasn't gonna say all that. I wasn't gonna even say all that.
It's like you selling that car, $300.
Oh man,
give me about 2 weeks.
right. Oh man, yeah.
Right. So you're the DJ at the end of the fireworks in Detroit, Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
The first one that came to mind is "Play at Your Own Risk." That's one of my favorites. And let's see, what would be the next one? So "Play at Your Own Risk" and "What's Going On."
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
Introspective. And last one, you can rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
I'm gonna go Malik Yakini.
Wow, love Baba Malik.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Malik Yakini. I mean, he's a person that I think since my mind started to get focused on like transitioning to like, all right, what's going to be the thing that I do to make money and whatever that is, American dream stuff, to like wanting to be about serving people and bringing resources to our community. He's a person I watch from afar, and I appreciate his ability to have big vision and pull it off and see it through, right? Like I talk to people often that either are scared to like have big vision,
scale up,
or they have some really big that they can talk about, but not necessarily take their time to figure out what it takes to execute and pull it off. He's the first person I saw do like things that I thought were huge with, in Soroma,
Black Star Community
Bookstore.
I would reference, he was my very first Detroit is Different podcast guest.
Wow.
If you listen to it, even though the audio is first podcast starting, it's really deep. He talks about his medallion making business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that he's had stuff that he probably forgot he did. You know what I mean?
Detroit's reggae. That's funny. It's like that interview is on like a reggae site. Because I didn't know in like the 80s or 90s, Detroit played such a pivotal role in the American reggae scene.
Yeah, but I would name it after. Yeah,
that's powerful.
I would name it. It'd be Malik or Yakini or
I'm with it.
Some version of that. Yeah,
I'm with it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Peace.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate you.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.